Good morning. Looking at computers, looking at how much money you can spend custom building computers. I'll get to that. There's a whole topic on this I want to talk about today because time is money and I'm spending too much time processing files, really, really big files, which I'll get to and explain. I'll explain what Stefan's been doing. Then I think next week we're going to be talking about precisely what was in those big files. G'day, Stefan. Thanks for joining. Stefan's the other guy who's processing the big files. Sorry, mate. I was going to say it's early. It's 7 o'clock. I've been awake since 2 something, just gazillion things on the brain. So I'm on my third coffee already at 7 a.m. Oh. I'm Eric Simon. Thanks for joining, guys. Let's just start with the easy bit. Let's start with the sponsor, who you may have heard of before. That's 1Password. 1Password, my preeminent, most regular, most frequent, longest standing sponsor. Extended access management, securing every sign-in for every app on every device. I love seeing 1Password in the F1. I like turning it on and actually seeing like 1Password on Verstappen's car. I don't know how much money they had to pay for that sponsorship, but that is amazing, amazing prime position. And it's just been very, very interesting in my now, when did I start using 1Password? 12 years? We always go completely off script with 1Password. But I have been talking about this blog post a lot this week, which we're going to come back to in a moment as well. Only secure password is the one and we'll figure it out from there. Oh man, 2011. 21st of March 2011. I've been using 1Password, the password manager, for more than 14 years now. 14 and a half years. Wow. Anyway, go and get 1Password if you don't have them already. In that time, of course, we have done a lot of transitioning from just passwords to passkeys, which not only sync via 1Password, which in my even unbiased opinion in terms of this week's sponsor, is the best way to sync it. I don't like the idea of syncing passkeys either via my iThings, because then I need to get them on my PC things, or my browser things, because I want them in the other places as well. So 1Password does the syncing of that. But of course, they're focusing a lot more on enterprise here. Trellica by 1Password. Discover SaaS application, automate lifecycle management, and optimize SaaS spend. We're going to talk a lot more about 1Password, not just the remainder of this year, but next year as well. They're going to be around for a long time yet, which I'm very happy about. Oh, wow. It's an interesting question. Stephen, is the audio and video out of sync for anyone else? Yes. Damn it. 3 coffees. Yeah. One day Troy and Tech will get on well. All right, here's the problem. The problem is I updated Windows right before this, and I left enough time for it to reboot and not enough time for it to test. Am I seeing a delay on the video? 1, 2, 3. How many seconds delayed am I? 1, 2, 3. Otherwise, you can, and I know how annoying it is when you watch, it's like when you watch a streaming TV show and for some reason it gets out of sync. And even if it's just like that fraction of a second out of sync, it's super, super annoying. For those of you listening to the podcast later on, this is not your problem. For me now, I don't think I can really do much about it. Oh wow, 5 seconds-ish, says Marek. Damn, that's a lot. The words of the Mythbuster. There's your problem, don't ever update. Well, you know what? It's going to lead me through to the thing that I wanted to discuss anyway, which is around PCs. So first of all, apologies if you're watching this and it just looks like rubbish. Maybe minimize the window and just listen to what I have to say, because you're not going to see anything of interest anyway. But I really would like some input on this. And it brings me to this thing about rebuilding the PC. Now, where do we even begin with this? I put it in there as a last moment thought this morning, but I knew that people here would have good ideas, and people listening to it later on will have good ideas. Hopefully they're not watching it as well and complaining about the lip sync. So I'm talking to you on a desktop. It's a Lenovo 720p that I bought start of COVID, I'd say. So let's call it 5.5 years ago. And this is sort of the main machine I use for everything. It drives 2 wide screens and 1 ultra wide screen. I do a lot of the processing of data breaches and stealer logs on there. I do a lot of the coding, etc., everything on here. It is the workhorse machine. And then I've got a P-series Lenovo laptop sitting over there, which then travels with me as well, and anything I do when I'm on the road is over there. Now, a lot of data breaches, such as the 3 we'll talk about later on today, are no-brainers in that they are small file sizes without too much processing. Now, what I mean by small file sizes is anywhere up to a handful of gigabytes. A handful, yeah. Let's call it single-digit gigabytes. And we can run things like our email extractor through that very, very fast, no problems at all. Where we start to run into problems is when things get really large. Now, as an example, there's one we're dealing with at the moment, which is stealer logs, among other things. And I think we'll be talking about that in detail next week. Fix the lip sync by then. Hey, James. Yes, I know that the lip sync is out, but thanks anyway for everyone joining. Maybe we should just put that in the chat. I know the lip sync is out. Sorry. Okay. The data that we're dealing with at the moment, there is one file that's almost 3 terabytes. Almost 3 terabytes for one file. In that file is a huge number of stealer log data and credential stuffing data. Loads of email addresses, loads of passwords. We have to do things like get all the distinct stealer log combinations out of it. We have to get all the distinct email addresses out of it. We have to extract the passwords. It's basically just like massively fast, well, not massively fast, this is the problem, but massive amounts of I/O from the disk to the CPU, storing in memory for when we do things like distincts. And my machine is going like an absolute dog processing this. Apologies to dogs for using the term. Now, Stefan, on the other hand, has got a very, very fast SSD. He's got one of the, I think he said the other day, he's got a 4 terabyte, one of the Samsung 980 Pro, whatever they're up to now, as I do in this machine, except they're years old and they're so small that I can't fit a 3 terabyte, almost 3 terabyte file on it. He's obviously got it plugged in a fast motherboard as well. I think he had a Threadripper CPUs. Anyway, he's got a fast machine. He's able to process this thing in lightning speed. Now, part of the solution here is get Stefan to process the really big files. Part of the solution too is I think it's time for a PC refresh. I think 5.5 years for an absolute workhorse, which, if I'm honest, is obviously feeling laggy, which is why that sync is out at the moment. I don't know if I can blame the age of the PC for that. But it's getting that OS right. You know how like over time things just sort of slow down? And I've never rebuilt this machine. It is still running the original OS install. Now, ZR, I was just waiting for someone to blame Windows because I knew it would happen. So, Windows is the environment that I am familiar with, that I'm most productive in. If you have come here, not necessarily you, but anyone else, listen to this later on, to suggest that I need a Mac or it's going to be the year of Linux on the desktop or something like that, you're in the wrong place. I don't want to listen to it. Like literally, this is the environment that I work in. And of course, Windows can run very, very fast, as Stefan has demonstrated with the speeds he's getting. So I want to run Windows. Now, the next question someone will ask, or was already thinking, is why don't I just do all this processing in the cloud? I never end up finishing this blog post, but there was a period there where I was writing a blog post about effectively the cloud is not the answer to everything. And obviously there are many, many good things that you can do in the cloud. James says Windows is adware. Hashtag Linux. Many good things you can do in the cloud. But the idea of processing really large volumes of data in the way that we do when we're dealing with data breaches, which is lots of everything from like, let's write some PowerShell scripts to parse through it, or let's write some C# code to parse through it. Let's load it into a local database. Let's ad hoc query it. Let's compare it to other sets of data that we have in the local environment. Having a fast machine that you can work on locally is really, really valuable for that sort of work. And then at the right time, we offload workloads into the cloud. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to try and do all of that remotely for multiple reasons. Now, to the point I made when I started this podcast about the time being money, I've blown a lot of time mucking around with these files this week. I am frustrated. I'm annoyed. I'm a bit pissed. The whole thing. I'm a bit over it. I need to update this machine. Now, the question for folks listening is, what should I get? And I think what I'm going to do, when I originally did my Ubiquiti setup here at home, almost a decade ago now, it's a lot of time ago, I put out a gist somewhere and it's like, hey, this is what I think my design should be. And then I got all these comments in here and that helped ultimately drive what I ended up with. And I think I'm going to do the same thing here at the PC. But my requirements, to outline a few, is super, super fast I/O from disk to processor, just loading the thing up with as much RAM as what is financially feasible. And this is the hard bit too, because when you're using it for a business purpose and it's a tax deduction and it helps you do things which are ultimately part of your business and part of your income generation, where's the ROI? How much should you spend? And that's a rhetorical question because you guys don't know. and I'm not sure that I know either. But I started having a look at some custom build machines. Now I'll come back to whether I should be building it myself or not. And if you just go straight to the top of the tree, suddenly there's like tens of thousands of dollars, even tens of thousands of American dollars, the expensive ones, on PCs that you max out. And it's very easy to get nuts very quickly. But then in your brain, you're going, well, okay, but if I use this for the next 5 years and it saves that amount of time or allows me to be that much more productive, very, very hard to actually quantify it. Marek says, Simon, live stream a PC build when you have all the components. All right, well, let me tackle that before I come to Marek. So 30 years ago, showing my age, 30 years ago, when I was still a teenager, I loved building PCs, and I spent a lot of time doing that. So my first jobs were building PCs. I have not done this for a very long time. If I'm honest, I'm not overly keen on investing a bunch of my time going through that process and then needing to come up to speed and then needing to troubleshoot stuff myself, particularly for something that is at the absolute heart of my job. I really, really need to be able to like hit the ground running with this. And I think on reflection, what I'd like to do is crowdsource the support to spec it. And then there are some local places where I can just go, just build me this. This is the spec I want. Build me this. And then I pick it up and I bring it home and I plug it in and I start being productive straight away. That is what I'd like to do. Now, it might be different if I had a good mate here on the ground and he's like, come on, I'll come over one day and I'll just help you build the whole thing. But I just don't want to, I'm just picturing copious amounts of time being bled out as I sit there chat GPTing why something won't boot, or yeah, I just don't feel that I need that. Nathan says, I used to build PCs, but I bought a Dell with 5-year pro support during COVID. If there's a problem, I don't want to waste it fixing it. Make a call, get it sorted, luckily no issues. And that's why I bought the Lenovo. Now, the same thing. I have not had any problems with the Lenovo, but I feel particularly once you get into very specific requirements around things like speed. I had a very brief look at the Lenovo website the other day, and I don't think I can find what I want. I do think an AMD Threadripper is probably going to be the right way to go this time, which from what I could see, they no longer do. I'm pretty sure they did before. And then the prices get really, really nuts for what you get. Nathan says, you say your time is better spent working than fixing a problem with hardware. And look, at least for me, if if something does go wrong later on, like I've got the laptop, I've got a high-end portable machine there I can use, but I still just don't want to muck around with it. Marek says, fast storage is also quite expensive on the cloud, since ideally you start looking at network storage for files of that size. Yeah, and it's, if you think about, what was that drive? Stefan's not on the live stream at the moment. He's, hopefully he's looking at Slack, fixing a problem we have, which I'll explain at the moment in the name of transparency. He's just getting some like ridiculous speeds out of this. What was the last thing he said over here? If only Stefan was here. Do you ever find like Slack just becomes a fire hose of stuff that makes it very, very hard to find what you actually need with? Try and speak properly. I can't even find where it is. It was something like some ridiculous number of gigabits per second that he was able to read on this drive. I'm sure there's a photo of the drive. What was it, Stefan? It was. I know it was one of the Samsung NVMe's, which have been really top notch for many, many years now. I remember at least, well, probably a decade ago, having a Samsung NVMe that was. Anyway, trust me. He can chime in later on when I do the gist and sort of do the build stuff. James says, when I say build, I'm not necessarily meaning yourself by hand. Pre-built cookie cutters always get old fast when they aren't customizable as I want. So one of the, I'm sure there are multiple different places here in Australia, because obviously local's kind of important when they're shipping and building an entire PC, that can do this. But there's a few different websites here where you can sort of go through and obviously spec something or choose from a pretty wide range of specs. And if you want to have crazy cases and things like this, a lot of them appeal to gamers. That is fine. But if I also look at some of the, show you what I'm looking at. Let me find a good example. Custom, pick the parts, creative focus, office range, industry, hyper focus. How much do these get? I'll drop this in the chat. So, and the only reason I'm picking this one is because it comes up predominantly in the searches, because obviously they're paid for ads. Aftershockpc.com.au, Focus X high performance workstations. Now remember, these are Australian dollars, so take off about a third if you want to get to the American dollars. But these guys will go through and build pretty much whatever you want. So I'm a little bit tempted to figure out what I want, crowdsourcing it from people that understand. For example, I run a SQL Server instance locally because that's really, really handy for doing everything from development of Have I Been Pwned through to if I do want to load a bunch of data in there and do the sorts of queries that SQL Server is very good at. That's very memory intensive. I need to load this thing up with as much memory as possible, but it doesn't need to be, what's that really expensive memory, which is like fault tolerant for, anyway, I just need to dump loads of stuff in there. Nathan says, I've sourced custom built machines from Leader, Dist, for one of our clients, and they offer on-site warranty. Who's Leader? Is that in Australia? Drop me a link. I know you can't drop a link because it's, for some reason with YouTube, I haven't configured it right. Put me an obfuscated link that I can copy and edit. So what else do I need? What else is relevant to that? I think that's just going to come the build thread. There'll be a thread somewhere. Maybe I'll even start that now. We've got to head back to Europe very shortly for events and things. So maybe during that trip, we'll try and spec all this up, get it right, and then we'll be good to go when I come home. Now, speaking of specing things, last week someone was talking about coffee machines, and I mentioned Synesso MVP Hydra, and we went and had a look at some of these the other day, and it's going to be a lot of money going on this, but it's super, super cool. I'm going to drop into the chat the example I was looking at. So this is a commercial machine which you can get with 1, 2, or 3 group heads. If it's at the home, you obviously only need the one. Is that the right link for that? Instagram? Yeah, that is the right link. Let's drop that in the chat there. So I think that's going to be the machine. It won't be green though. We can spec whatever color we want, which is the cool thing. They like custom make them. So I think we'll probably go with the black theme, maybe like a black and a gunmetal gray for the metal bits. But that's going to be very, very cool as well. So I think we're going to try and lock that in over the next week. And then hopefully, again, once we get back from travel, that machine will be ready. I'm not sure the lead time. Leader Computers, Nathan says. They are a distributor. Leader Computers. Let's have a look at that. Can I find it? Leader Computers, locally built, Australian owned. Sounds good. Good start. I'll drop that in the chat for people interested in that. Jan says, I actually designed a couple of things with the Australian market in mind. They can be mostly 3D printed because of the high shipping. What are you 3D printing? When I say build, I say, mostly 3D printed. What? Explain, because now you've piqued my interest because you said 3D printing. So look at Leader. Corporate. They look like desktops. Okay, that is another thing to look into. I think, again, what I'd like to do is figure out the spec from people in our industry that are doing large volumes of data processing or SQL Server. What's really efficient for Visual Studio? Did I ask ChatGPT the other day? I think I did. And I got a very confident answer, which could be completely wrong. Maybe we'll put that in there as well. Now, I mentioned Stefan is hopefully fixing one of our problems at the moment with Have I Been Pwned. One of the very frustrating issues that we have on rare occasion is inconsistent caching in Cloudflare Edge nodes. And I've had 2 tickets overnight from people saying the last data breach we loaded yesterday, Prosper, which I'll talk about later on, the API to return the data about that breach is returning 404. And as far as I can tell, it's only happening in the EDW edge node, which is in New York. I don't know if it's happening in other edge nodes as well. It's certainly possible, but it's very frustrating. I've tried flushing out the Cloudflare cache by the full path. That unfortunately has not fixed the problem, which kind of then leaves you with not many options. That normally when this has happened in the past, and I've tried flushing it by just flushing out the entire cache for everything on Cloudflare, that also hasn't fixed the problem. So we need to talk to our friends there in order to sort this out. Now, while we're on the topic of problems and speed, in Australia we have the National Broadband Network, our NBN, which is what most of us are using for internet. There's also Starlink as well, but NBN is sort of the I guess the government-backed broadband infrastructure. And I recently upgraded it from 1 gigabit to 2 gigabit. The NBN man came out, he changed the modem in the garage to make it 2 gigabit compatible. And I did the speed test and I got 1 gigabit. I got exactly what I got before. And the penny has only just dropped that the Unified Dream Machine Pro that I've been running for several years now, the RJ45 WAN port maxes out at 1 gigabit. So there are other Dream machines which max out at 2.5 gigabit. There is also the SFP port, and I've just learned that from Stefan again, thank you. I've just learned that you can get an RJ45 to SFP converter. It's literally a big SFP stick that you stick into the socket and then the RJ45 goes into it. So I'm trying to figure out how to get my full 2 gigabits, and I think that might be the path forward, the path of least resistance forward. So hopefully that'll fix it. Nathan, a nice all-flash SAN would perform well. Yeah. And I guess in terms of SAN and storage, I mean, I've got a lot of Synology stuff, which does great for like long-term storage. Lots of nice sort of RAID disks, back up to other devices, which I can rotate off-site. All that's great. It is really talking about what can I actually put locally on this machine that has absolute minimum latency, absolute maximum throughput back into the bus and into the CPU and other bits. Evening, Wayne. Yes or no, the audio's out of sync. You even say it. Max says, by the way, I thought about the Qantas situation the other day. Would you ever be open to companies that suppress data that to provide the list of affected users to HLBP in a different way? Was this next on our list? Pretty sure. Certainly on our list. What am I meant to be doing? I think it is the next thing on the list. And I have a lot of opinions about Qantas and the Injunction. Yes, next on the list, Qantas breach. All right, so as a recap, back in July, I got a notice from Qantas as a Qantas customer, a very, very good Qantas customer, I might add, that I was in a data breach. In fact, I got that notice when I was getting on my 300th Qantas ticketed flight. I say Qantas ticketed because very often I buy Qantas tickets and I end up on an Emirates plane. Most of the time I go to Europe. Emirates planes, sorry Qantas, they're just much nicer. and you get much more direct connections, particularly if we're going through to, as we will week after next, straight through to Oslo. Dubai, Oslo, 2 hops, beautiful. Can't do that with Qantas. You have to go through Singapore, Heathrow, and it's a mess. So, and they're just the ones that I've recorded in Tripit since I started recording in Tripit, I don't know, a dozen years ago, something like that. So, more than 300 Qantas ticketed flights. And I got the notice about there being a data breach, and I was like, all right, well, that's, I am familiar with data breaches. This is just business as usual. And then I got some updates from them. And then we had this website stand up the other day. I've still got it open here on the iPad. I'm not going to tell you the address, but we'll talk about the chronology of what has happened with this. The Scattered Lapsus Hunters website, where we did speak about this last week, so I won't spend too much time on this, where they were claiming that they were going to dump on Saturday, last week our time, so pretty much 6 days ago, as of the time recording, they were going to dump a whole bunch of data, including like 1 billion Salesforce records, then data from Toyota, FedEx, Disney, UPS, a whole bunch of others, and Qantas. Now, by the time they announced that, Qantas already had an injunction in place, issued by the Supreme Court in New South Wales, one of our states here. And that injunction would make it illegal to publish the data. Now, I talked about this at length last week, because last week I wrote the blog post about injunctions being the thoughts and prayers of data breach response. You know, that it might be a good sentiment, but it doesn't actually do anything. And sure enough, the injunction did nothing to stop the publishing of the data. Now, this should not be a surprise, but I'm going to go through some of the stuff that's happened since, just because it's, I don't know. I'm going to say draw your own conclusions, but I'm going to give you my conclusions anyway because it's enormously frustrating. So let's have a look at the tweet thread here. As much as the Scattered Lapsus Hunters claimed that they were going to dump all of this stuff, including the 1 billion Salesforce things, on the weekend, what ended up happening is they dumped 6 different data breaches. Qantas, Vietnam Airlines, Albertsons Companies, Gap, the clothing company, Fujifilm, and NG Resources. They only dumped the 6. And I was there watching their Telegram channel, refreshing the browser, waiting to see what would happen. And it was very erratic. It was like something like an hour before they meant to dump it. I was at my parents' place, and I was like, I just need to get home and, by 2 o'clock when they're going to dump all this data. But I was at my parents' place watching it, and they're like, are we just going to dump stuff early? And then they decided to just dump some stuff. And it was all a little bit all over the place. But eventually those 6 things turned up. Now, for all the reasons I discussed last week, Qantas we can't touch. I did actually have someone in particular got very vocal in the comments on my blog. I know, what are the chances? About how do we even know that the injunction is legitimate? Qantas can't tell me what to do. I was like, well, it's not really Qantas, it's the court. They apply to the court grants the injunction. And it applies to the threat actors, and it also applies to other folks in Australia wanting to access this data. And as a result of this, we have not seen the commentary from Australia on what's in the data. We have not seen it. I have had multiple people send me links to the data, and I've had to say, no, we can't touch the data. So, James says, tell us from jail if it's legitimate. Well, I can tell you it's legitimate because I've had people outside of Australia in very serious legitimate security capacities confirm that my data is legitimate, that of myself and of my son and my wife. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that it's legitimate, and they have been able to confirm that in ways that only someone seeing the data would be able to say. And that's all I'm going to say on that. I have not downloaded or accessed the data. So there's absolutely no surprises whatsoever about that. Now, Qantas's response, first of all, they sent multiple notices to me as a customer very early on about the data breach. There has been no communication from them to individuals since that incident. since the data got dumped. And I do find that a bit frustrating because they now know that this is in circulation. They now know that the injunction has not stopped the threat actor from publishing it, nor many other people from downloading it. But they haven't said to people, hey, look, just so you know, your data's now out there circulating around. We told you there's a data breach. Now it's all over the place. And it is all over the place. The injunction has done absolutely nothing to stop it being from all over the place, because why would it? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm frustrated about that. Of course, because we have not been able to access it, we have not been able to notify our subscribers. We have not been able to notify our domain monitoring subscribers. So there's now a whole bunch of corporate data floating around there that the organisations who own it do not know about, because they've got staff who, probably quite legitimately for the purposes of their business, had Qantas accounts. And we can't let them know. This data was, I've done a heap of media. Every time I see a friend at the moment, they're like, hey, I saw you on the TV the other day. Because I did a heap of media in the lead up and then over the weekend and earlier this week as well. And the question is always there about, is this on the dark web? So you guys understand what the dark web is and is not, but I've had to try and explain this to the media. And here's a chronology of what's actually happened. They had and still have a .onion website. They had a clear web domain, which was breachforums.hn. That's a Honduras TLD. I incorrectly said it was a Hungarian TLD at some point in the past. It is Honduras. I should know that because I own Troy.hn. Anywho, so that was stood up there. FBI sees that. There's now a very nice splash page from the feds there. They have stood up another website on another clear web address. I won't give you the URL for that because it's live now, and it is one click away from the download links for all these other websites. Now, I'm not going to click on the Qantas one, even though they wouldn't download it. But if I look at, say, Vietnam Airlines, they have now removed that content. Interesting. So what happened when it first went up is there was a link off to another clear web website, which was a file hosting service. And all of the data was available there. And that was available for some number of hours, and then it got taken down. And then like the next day, it was all back up there again. And that was there for many, many, many days. And I haven't checked for probably the last couple of days. But as of now, it's not there anymore. Now, of course, it is everywhere else. I've had people literally sending me the data via Telegram. And again, I have to go, I can't touch that one. It's everywhere. Now, despite this, and I have a feeling I might have mentioned this last week, but somewhere in here, Qantas had, oh no, you know what? I put it in the injunction blog post. Qantas had made a comment to the effect of they've got an injunction to prevent the uploading of the data. It does not prevent it. It did not prevent it. It is now all over the place. So that has done no good whatsoever. What else has happened here that's of relevance since that time? I always got to check the names. Scattered Lapsus Hunters have put out at one point in time this screed, I think is a reasonable term, this screed on their Telegram channel. Telegram channel has now been taken down, by the way, about everything that was wrong with everything in the world. There's a bit in here that was about Australia, which was a bit entertaining to read. Where is it? So this one, just announced extortion. Oh, there, somewhere along the line here, they've announced extortion as a service. After today, following Monday or sometime next week, we will be launching our very own first public EAS, extortion as a service program. Similar to how a RAS, which is ransomware as a service, program works, but with no locking encryption. There will be a portal dedicated to this and instructions on how to partake in this service. The main benefit of this program will be the fact that you can use our name to extort your target with significant success. I've got a typo here, it's them. With significant success than you'd see from extorting your target privately yourself behind no name or a name with no credibility / reputation / trust / history to it whatsoever. Is there trust in this name? I don't know. It's definitely reputation. Anyway, so they reckon they're launching ransomware as a service. I can't see that really getting much traction. And I can't even find where that that screed, as I referred to it, is now. But a lot of what these guys have posted has turned out to be, they haven't followed through. So, for example, we've seen these 6 data breaches. We haven't seen all of the others. The ransomware as a service, who knows? I haven't heard any more. The Telegram channel's now gone. There are other claims and things made, things like claiming there's a Telstra breach, which Telstra has vehemently denied, and we've really heard no more news about it as well. I think last week I said, yes, it's basically just white pages data by the sound of it, which is publicly available data. So this has certainly captured attention. I guarantee it has captured a lot of law enforcement attention. We partly know that because the feds took down their Clearweb website and put their nice banner there. I wouldn't be at all surprised if in the coming weeks, months and years, we see multiple people involved with this arrested, and they will be very young men, if not children. Like every time, it's the same thing. Let's look at the comments. James, referring to Qantas, says, tell us from jail if it's legitimate. I would prefer not to do that. Marek says, son, called Qantas and was assured that only people with an email address linked to a frequent flyer account were present in the breach. As far as I know, Qantas has notified everyone involved. Now, I won't know for sure. We certainly have had other data breaches where companies, and I've got one in particular in mind I won't go into, but where companies have notified some people but missed a whole bunch of others and then never notified them. I think there's actually going to be an interesting follow-on story from this later on. I'm just going to wait until a bit more dust settles before we talk about this. But I do believe it is just related to frequent flyer accounts, and more specifically, I'm pretty sure it relates to people who've made calls to the call centre about frequent flyer accounts. My parents, who have taken many Qantas flights in the past, have not had any notices at all from Qantas. Now, I don't know if they're in the data breach or not because they're not allowed to touch it. But James is so frustrating. One of the few people that should have the data can't. I hope this isn't a trend. I fear that it is a bit of a trend, especially in Australia. We have seen it before. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it again. Honestly, now, every time we see a data breach in Australia of a major corporation, we have to be extra cautious to understand whether there is an injunction in place. And frankly, part of it as well is we might just have to be more expeditious and load this data before there's an injunction. If there's an injunction that comes later on, that doesn't apply to people that already have it. There might be some other negotiations, as has happened in the past. But yeah, it might mean that the only way we can get notices from people is to be faster than the injunction. Anyway, that's just dumb. That's just dumb. Here we are. Oh, there's Stefan. We're just talking about you. Now, the things we're talking about while you're away, first of all, I know my audio is out of sync with my video because this is going to be the quick recap for Stefan. Because I took the latest Windows update just before I started, and that's the best thing I can come up with, the best answer I can come up with. I did not test before doing this because I literally had 1 minute free. I was talking about how fast your hard drives are. I mentioned that you're going to be fixing the Cloudflare problem with the cache, which I've sent you some Slack messages on. And then we're just complaining about Qantas and how that we do not have the data. Now, let's talk about data that we do have. So in that 6 stash, call it 6 stash, of data that was dumped on Saturday, Vietnam Airlines was one of them. Now, Vietnam Airlines actually had a lot of data in it. That had more, allegedly, than Qantas. So allegedly, we just got to keep saying that because it's what the threat actors have told us. Qantas has 5-something million records, and Vietnam Airlines, look at me the exact number here, had 7.3 million unique email addresses, of which not very volatile data, email addresses, names, phone numbers, dates of birth, and loyalty membership numbers. 39% of those were already in Have I Been Pwned. That is a very low percentage, and you'll understand why when we see the next two in the moment. A lot of the reason I suspect that's very low is because it's Vietnam. Now, if we sort of look at the way the world has divided itself down, big social media platforms, big online e-commerce services, the really big data breaches that are in Have I Been Pwned, they tend to be very US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe, UK dominant usages. So that's where the audience tends to be. Every time we get something outside of that realm, we've got a data breach from the Philippines, we've multiple from Singapore, Indonesia, the hit rate is always much, much lower. Hey, VXDB, welcome. Yeah, I know, it's desynced. It's annoying. It's about 5 seconds. I took a Windows update and went straight into this live stream, and now something doesn't work. Sorry. You don't need to look at me. Just listen. It's easier. So anyway, that's Vietnam Airlines, low hit rate. Now, the next one here is Hello Cake. Now, I had not heard of Hello Cake, but I have heard of erectile dysfunction. And the main reason I've heard of that, before you jump to conclusions, is spending 14 years at Pfizer, the makers of Viagra. And apparently, Hello Cake makes ED medication. You may colloquially know them as boner pills. But I think it's for men and women as well. Anyway, so they had a data breach, 23,000 records there. That is marked as sensitive because it is, regardless of the fact that it's sexually orientated, it's health orientated. Any health-related data breaches that we have, we flag as sensitive. They're not publicly searchable. They contain names, phone numbers, physical addresses, dates of birth, and purchases. 83% of those already in Have I Been Pwned. So 83% of the people buying the Hello Cake ED meds were already in the database. Now, I'm going to talk about this last breach in a moment because it is a bit bigger than the others. I just want to look at my comments here. So Stefan's here. He's loving his new SSD. It is a Samsung 9100 Pro. Stefan, what were some of the specs you had on that in terms of throughput? It was some ridiculous number of gigabits a second or something. And mate, what I was just saying as well while you're away is that I'm going to do, I think I might just do like a gist somewhere of the spec I think I need to rebuild this machine and get people to chime in. But yeah, you're getting some awesome results out of that. Marek says, would you provide an alternative way, if there isn't one already, for companies that go the Injunction way to provide HLBP with user breach data? Look, Qantas knows where to find me. Because not only am I a loyal customer, but I think I put in the blog post as well, I'm a shareholder as well of Qantas. I'm the data breach guy. They can look me up. It's not hard to find me. If they wanted to provide that data, they could. I did get in touch with people in Qantas very early on. When I say very early on, like July as well, just to make sure that I had the right context there to say, look, if I see this data, let me know who to talk to. Because when there is a big data breach, and particularly when it's something that would be so impactful as Qantas is, I want to make sure I have a go-to person there that I can go, hey, look, I've just been sent the data. Sometimes it does come to me before it goes to anyone else. Not in this case, obviously, because it just got dumped publicly. You know, do I have the right connection there? And I did have the right connection. So they had every opportunity, if they wanted, to provide us the data. I suspect, so actually, here's another interesting fact. I don't know if I put this anywhere, but the law firm responsible for the injunction is not named. And there was a little bit of press around deliberately not naming the law firm because they were worried about retribution from the threat actors. Now, I can take a very educated guess at who the law firm is based on this practice of issuing injunctions. Now, that's public information about which previous data breaches have had injunctions. But the two that come to mind in Australia were both the same law firm, a law firm that I've had direct interaction with. And I think I could make a reasonable guess about it. I won't say, because obviously they don't want to be named, because they know that it would raise the ire of the threat actors. Anyway, I would undoubtedly assume that that law firm's objective is to make sure that that data is not in any other place that they... Let me rephrase that, because that whole thing just makes no sense as I say it, because it's all over the place. I would assume that they are doing everything they can to make sure that they can control where it goes. Now, obviously, they can't control where it goes once it's posted all over the clear web and Telegram, but yeah, I just can't imagine them going, let's go and get a court injunction to make sure that people can't analyze it, and then let's go and hand millions of email addresses to Troy. I just don't see it's going to happen. You guys have an understanding of what I do with Have I Been Pwned and the goals of it and the objectives and the ethical compass, for want of a better term. In defense of Qantas and this law firm, I think it would be a very hard argument to make to say we got an injunction to make sure it can't be distributed, and then we gave millions of email addresses to Have I Been Pwned. Now, Have I Been Pwned is also not the only data breach notification service out there. There are many others of all sorts of levels of shadiness, including ones that are very legitimate, run by very well-known security companies. I think that it would also create difficulty for them if they gave it to us and then other people popped up or other services popped up and went, hey, we're good guys as well. And then they didn't give it to them. We've certainly had instances in the past where we've had the likes of law enforcement agencies provide us data, and they've provided usually only a very, very small number of other services, but provide those other services data as well. I got an email literally today, I won't say from which part of the world, but from another part of the world where we will see, by the sound of it, another one of those instances come up shortly. And they may well provide that data to other parties too. So I think the point is it's starting to make it very difficult to just give us data and no one else. And I'm defending the organisation here. I'm conscious of that. I'd rather they didn't have the injunction at all, but here we are. Stefan, stats. 14.3 gigabits per second sequential read, 13.2 gigabits per second sequential write, 1.7 million IOPS read, 1.4 million IOPS write. The reads and writes are over twice the rate of the 990 Pro. So this is with his, what model did we have there, Stefan? The 9100 Pro. IOPS reminder bump. So for the folks listening to this later on and helping me design this machine, help me go faster than Stefan. No, I don't want to go faster than Stefan because then I might have to process the big Steeler logs. Help me go as fast as possible and I'll still get Stefan to process them. All right, the last breach here is Prosper. Now, I didn't know who Prosper was. It turns out they do lending. They are US based. The first thing that happens when someone sends me a data breach is normally I'll just try and figure out how big it is. So I ran our open source email extractor over it. 17.6 million unique email addresses came back. That's big. Then I'll go through and I'll do verification. And verification I've written about many, many times before. It's usually things like, can I take email addresses and put it in a password reset form? And there's an enumeration vector which comes back and tells me that the account exists because it's been sent a password reset email, or it doesn't exist, in which case it tells me that, hey, these random addresses from the breach corpus all actually exist on the website. And you can do that in a privacy preserving way insofar as I don't get access to anyone's account, obviously, but the website by design will tell you whether that exists or not. Verified it. Next step is usually to go and search for, in this case, Prosper data breach. And I found a disclosure notice from them from earlier last month, being earlier September. So they know about it. And their description of it was also very good. It explained what was in there, including social security numbers in the US, which is obviously quite serious. And I went to load it. It's probably about a week ago. It's more than that. Probably about 2 weeks ago. I went to load it and I hesitated because it is a very large volume and it's got social security numbers and they do loans. So the data in there also included some information around your credit rating. It included income. That's pretty sensitive information. And I thought I just want to be ultra certain about this. So I verified with, I think it was 7 or 8 different Have I Been Pwned subscribers. Ultimately, so I did my usual thing. I emailed a bunch of recent subscribers for our service that are also in Prosper and said, hey, look, someone's just sent me some data. I just need to make sure it's actually legit before I load it. Would you be willing to help? 7 or 8 people went, yep, sent them the data, and they came back and like, yes, all of this is correct. And it's information I gave to Prosper. Also got in touch with Prosper. And I want to say, from the outset here, because I'm sure they're getting a bunch of queries today, which is not the best day in the office, but they were cool. They were very awesome. I got the perfect person in terms of the capacity that they're in. Also a very, very nice bloke. had a good phone conversation. And they responded in just the way that I'd hope an organisation would. They were receptive. They knew about Have I Been Pwned. I'm trying the right words here. They definitely knew about Have I Been Pwned. They were supportive of Have I Been Pwned. And they dealt with it really well. And I gave them a heads up and I let them know as soon as we put the notifications out that this is what we'd sent to our subscribers, which largely just relays the information that they put in the disclosure notice. I'm not leading anywhere with this, and there's no big finale where everything suddenly blows up. All that went into Have I Been Pwned, what are we at? Nearly a whole day ago. We had some loading problems yesterday, so it ended up a little bit later than I expected. We sent a bunch of notifications out to our subscribers. I've often said before, anywhere up to 1% of a data breach corpus is often our subscribers. Now, 1% of this would be 176,000. It definitely wasn't that much. It was a lot less than 1%, but we did send quite a large number of notifications to our subscribers. And that's inevitably why a bunch of them have now popped up and said, hey, for some reason our Cloudflare cache is playing up, which Stefan's fixing. So we'll sort that out. So that was quite a substantial one, and I really couldn't find any press about it before as well. I know there's some press now. That's bound to happen, and I hope it's going okay for those guys because I'm very happy with the way they dealt with it. Now, what else is in the comments here? Stephen, I think you should reach out to Linus Tech Tips and ask some suggestions on what you should need for Have I Been Pwned PC. I think I'm going to start with it on the gist. I feel like there's enough people in my immediate circle who really know what they're doing to give good advice on this. Stefan says, not sure you can go much faster with current tech unless you start going to specific PCIe expansion cards for NVMe drives that allow you to put them in RAID. Yeah, that might be overkill. Certainly don't think I need RAID in terms of redundancy, at least. Maybe there's speed benefits too. But you'd probably have to get a super motherboard. Oh, that sounds good. A super motherboard. And sacrifice the PCI X16 slots you normally use. Richard's in Oslo. G'day, Richard. How long are you in Oslo for? We're going to be in Oslo in 10 days, something like that. 10 and a bit. I think we're flying out of here in, what's today, Friday? 10 days. Stefan says, by the way, my specs are gigabytes per second, sorry, not bits. Was it a big B? I thought it was a little b. Oh, there it is a big B. Wow, okay, damn. Jeez, that's like literally 8 times more impressive. So thank you for clarifying that. Wayne says, what about UDM NAS? I do have one. I'm not actually using it much. It was a test unit they sent out. I have invested a lot in Synology NASs, and they tend to be the ones I use. But that's mostly for like effectively cold storage. From a rapid processing read perspective, doesn't work so well. Richard, just overnight, heading to Trondheim. Flight was delayed. So I'm in the Radisson overnight. Trondheim's cool. Been there. Stefan also says Troy only has Cat 5. So he can't hook up to 100 gigabits when you're installing the fibers in-house, Troy. Well, so here's going to be one of my next problems. There's always a bottleneck somewhere, right? So as I speak to you now, and I'm sure this is not the reason my audio is out of sync. So yeah, Richard and others joining more lately. I know it's out of sync. But my PC goes Ethernet into the wall, Cat 5 in the wall. I'm still getting gigabit plus speed. Cat 5 into the wall, down to the UDM Pro, which currently that RJ45 WAN port is limited to 1 gigabit, and then into the modem for the NBN, which is giving us 2 gigabits. Apparently it's 2 gigabits there, but of course I can't see the 2 gigabits because of the WAN port and the UDM. So we can fix the WAN port. I think that RJ45 to SFP converter is the one that's going to sort it out. which is good, but we can't fix the wiring in the wall for now. Just that the design of the house, and I've gone through this with the Sparky electrician, who's been so wonderful for many, many years, but it's just, for all sorts of reasons, it's very, very painful. But as I said before, we are expanding. We are expanding this house into next door. We're building a whole bunch of other stuff, and I'm sure we'll talk much more about that later on. And that is literally on the other side of this wall. And what we want to do is, instead of bringing the NBN in where it comes at present, we'll bring the NBN into part of the new build. As part of the home cinema we're building, I'm going to end up with a full-size rack. There's going to be in a proper climate-controlled room. We'll run the NBN all the way through to there, and then whether it's conduit or drills or a combination of the two, we will get fibre from there through to here. So ultimately, we should be able to get fibre all the way from the internet through to my PC here. That's an 18-month prospect. That's a much longer-term thing. But then that will also mean that I should have a very fast connection from the PC all the way through into the server rack and any network-attached devices there. That's still going to be way slower, obviously, than processing data locally on a fast SSD plugged into a fast bus on a fast motherboard. So there's that. James, I've been thinking about fibre. I don't need it, but it'd be nice to be future-proof. Yeah, I guess where it's not premature optimization. And I guess it's a question of what you're communicating backwards and forwards and how important that latency is. At the moment, the fact that I don't have fibre, in fact, the fact that I only have Cat5 between my PC and the NAS doesn't really matter, because the only time I'm really doing anything there is it's like, hey, we've finished processing this massive data breach. Say the like 3 terabyte file Steph and I are dealing with at the moment. If I zip that up and I send it over to the network attached storage, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it takes all night, because there's no time criticality then. It's like literally we're just backing up the file. Stefan, I'll keep picking your brain about that PC build as well. Before you joined, I was like, I think I'm just going to go and figure out what I want and then just get somewhere in Australia to just build it and ship it all completed. And I said, if I had a mate here, not in Iceland, who knew what they were doing, and I didn't actually have to invest the time to think about it and get up to speed with building a PC, it might be a different story. But yeah, anyway, we'll see. I'll start that list. Okay, folks, I'm gonna wrap it up there, and I'm gonna go and chase Stefan on the Slack to see if we can figure out this this Cloudflare caching problem, and yeah, hopefully solve that annoying thing. It's just like caching issues are just, yeah, it's one of software development's great unsolved problems. James says, got to be ready for the 28K movies on my Plex server one day. That is premature optimization. On that note, thanks, folks. I'll catch you again from home next week.